Hi and welcome back. My name's Faye and I'm a UK-based wedding photographer shooting weddings all over the world, and today I'm checking in from Tuscany. So funny story, I actually recorded this video last night, but as you can hear, the wildlife here is insane and all you could hear was the birds. So excuse me for holding my microphone really close to my mouth, but I'm hoping that I can save the audio despite the crazy wildlife that's going on behind me. So today I just thought I'd check in. Loads of stuff has gone wrong this trip, as it always does on destination, and loads of stuff went wrong last year as well. I do feel like I'm quite a relaxed person. I'm quite good at rolling with the punches and I don't really get stressed over the actual stressful stuff. Like something trivial, you'll probably find me in a pile of nerves, but the big stuff I'm quite good at navigating and getting on with it. So I just thought this video could be quite helpful in sharing some of the mishaps that have happened and just some hacks that I've picked up along the way so that you don't have to make those mistakes as well. Hopefully this video is going to help you if you are new to destination, if you're considering destination, maybe you've done destination before and these things have happened to you as well but you didn't know how to handle them. I'm not saying that I'm the oracle of destination weddings at all, but I do a lot of destination. Also, a little bit about me. I am a linguist by trade. My degree is in Spanish and Italian, and I've always travelled a lot from the age of 18. So before I was 18, I'd only ever been to Spain on holiday, but since then I've been to quite a lot of places around Europe, and then this year I even went to America for the first time and I went twice. So yeah, I travel a lot, and a lot of this stuff is stuff that will not just help you with destination weddings but also travel in general. So yeah, let's dive in. So the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about is which airport to fly from. I would always choose to do the travelling in the UK rather than abroad, because if something was to happen with your car, it's more likely that you'd be able to get lifts, or we know the public transport routes better. So for example, if you are flying to a really rural place, let's say Bergerac in the south of France, because that's next to quite a lot of wedding venues in the south of France, you're probably going to want to make the drive down to Stansted rather than get something from your local airport to somewhere 3 hours away in France and then have to make that journey. When you are looking at flights as well, as tempting as it is to go for one that's quite late in the afternoon, the ones earliest in the morning are always the ones that get cancelled the least. So it's a really good idea to either stay in an airport hotel the night before or make that drive. You're probably going to find that even with roadworks in the middle of the night, it's still easier for you to get to the airport first thing in the morning. And then you're going to get to the airport abroad in Europe at a reasonable time in the afternoon. This is important because especially for the rural airports abroad, a lot of the car hire places shut really early. Like Bergerac, for example, everywhere shuts. This was true when the last time I went to France, by the way, so may have changed, but a lot of them shut at around 7-8 p.m. So if you're getting a later flight and then it's delayed, or you sat on the tarmac, you're going to be getting really stressed out, thinking, oh no, I'm stranded now at the airport. And there's not a lot to do around these airports. I keep saying Bergerac because that's a recent example, but yeah, it's a really good idea to try and get the first flight of the day if you can, and then you're in your destination country nice and early, ready to get your car hire. Oh my god, the birds. On the topic of car hire, it's a really good idea to get car hire if you are anywhere that's not a city. It's so different in mainland Europe. It's a lot bigger than it is in the UK, and we're spoiled thinking that even in the rural villages they're still quite accessible. You can still get taxis. It's quite easy to get your way around. It's not like that in Europe. It's very different. So it's a really good idea to make sure that you've got car hire. This happened last week. We were in Sicily and we were staying in Syracuse. I'd done a lot of research and we decided to stay in central Syracuse near where the rehearsal dinner was going to be, rather than where the wedding and the recovery party was going to be. That was because I knew that we had 3 days before any of the shenanigans began to sort of get settled in, get used to the heat, and I knew that staying in a central town would be better because we'd be able to do boat trips and go out for meals and stuff. But at this point we were 3 weeks into my 5.5 week stint in Italy as well, and we'd been in Airbnbs, so I was thinking it would be quite nice to eat out in restaurants and stuff rather than cook. So it all worked out. The makeup artist, however, and I won't name and shame because it could have happened to anyone, decided to get accommodation in the rural Sicily area and also decided to get transport, so we'd organised taxis. When we went out, she literally replied to my stories and was like, where is this? And it was literally just a guy sat on a bridge playing music. I was like, oh babe, I'm in Syracuse. And she said, oh my God, there's nothing here. All the restaurants are shut. There's nothing for us to do. So when the couple went to the rehearsal dinner, I advised her, I recommended that she went into Syracuse and then used the couple's transports in and out of town for the like events to be able to do something. So she did that, but otherwise would have been quite restricted because there's no taxes in these places, like unless you organise transfers privately, which are very, very expensive. Once you're there, you're there. That being said, there are some situations where it's quite a good idea to get a transfer. I did this last year in Florence. You can drive around the edge of the city like you can in a lot of Italian places. You can drive around the edge, but if you go into the centre, you're going to get fined. That's because a lot of places are completely restricted to anything that's not public transport. But in some places as well, like Portofino, unless you are a resident, you are not allowed to drive there. So imagine the stress when I got to Portofino last year. I'd Googled it and decided to stay in Santa Margherita, which was 10 minutes away from Portofino, not just to save money on the accommodation, but because I'd heard that you could drive. When I got there, all of the streets are quite restricted and there's signs everywhere saying don't drive. It was fine because we already knew that there was going to be some distractions. It was fine because we already knew that there were going to be some restrictions and had actually organised transfers for the wedding via the wedding planner. But yeah, sometimes if you're in a city, it is better just to get public transport or transfers rather than drive, unless it's just a case that you're happy to drive to the Airbnb and then back to the airport, but use public transport whilst you're in the place, which is what we do most of the time. Quite often I'll try and pick somewhere that's quite central. I don't mind if it's up to like 30-45 minutes drive to the airport. I'd rather be somewhere quite central for the rest of the time because I like to get to my destinations nice and early to sort of settle in, acclimatise, get used to the heat and have some downtime in between wedding activities, because destinations do tend to be 2, 3, 4 days plus. So we've spoken a little bit about flight times, car hire. Yeah, the next thing that I'm going to talk to you about is accommodation, and I've been burnt by this. I will actually be releasing a vlog. If I haven't already, it will be coming soon. If I have, then I'll pop the link below. But yeah, basically we got to Tuscany and our Airbnb didn't exist, and that's the long and short of it. Now, usually I will always prefer hotels because it's safer. You do not need to register with the police. So if you're working abroad, this is good because when you stay in an Airbnb, you're supposed to go and register your like working status in the country at the local police station. Whereas when you stay in a hotel, you don't need to do that. They take all your passports and stuff and they do that on your behalf. So it's better if you're working in the destination country as well. But yeah, we got to Tuscany and our Airbnb didn't exist. We were driving around for 2 hours. It was very dodgy. I won't go into the story. I'll link the vlog below when it goes live. But yeah, it was quite stressful and we ended up getting the best hotel that we could find reviews wise in the local area and driving 45 minutes up the road to get to the amazing hotel where we are now. As a general rule, as a woman travelling alone, or a guy if you don't feel so safe as well, it's a good idea to stay in hotels just because there's more security. Again, Airbnbs tend to be a lot more rural, so if you're travelling alone with all of your kit, it just feels a little bit safer to be somewhere like with other people. Things to consider when looking for accommodation: if you are looking at Airbnbs, make sure that you select self check-in. If you're not selecting self check-in, chances are there's going to be massive restrictions when you come to check in. Sometimes the check-in isn't as late until 5 p.m, which they keep obviously quite, like, it's not always the most obvious thing until you've booked onto it and then you realise that there's all these restrictions. And quite often there'll be like a 2 or 3 hour window only for you to pick up your keys. And again, depending on when your flight arrives, it's very unlikely that your flight is going to be on time. Your car hire isn't going to take an arm and a leg to get sorted, and then you're going to be able to get to the accommodation, especially for that window. Chances are something's going to happen and you're going to be waiting around for a decent chunk of time. So getting self-check-in is really good if you're not getting hotels. If you're getting hotels and you've booked on to the first flight of the day, get in touch with them ahead of time to ask if they can do early check-in or if there's a space for you to leave your bags so that you can enjoy the facilities before you are able to check in. Because if check-in's not till 3 but you get there at 10, that's a long time to be carrying kit around. It's not even about having all the bags, it's about having all of your like life's assets on your back, in your backpack, and not being able to relax because there's nowhere safe for you to put them. In the past, if I've been in the middle of a really busy stint, I've just booked an extra night's accommodation for the night before, so that I know if I get there at 9:30 in the morning, because my flight was mega early, I know that I can check into my room straight away, have a nap, and then get to enjoy the day. It is a massively privileged position to be able to do that, but I know now after doing Destination to charge really good, because if I don't have the budget to be able to do stuff like that, I know that I'm not going to be well rested enough, and therefore I don't want to do the wedding. Destination weddings are brutal. They're really hot. The culture's a lot different. There's a lot of things different to when we shoot weddings in the UK. So yeah, I'd always just charge your worth. I did a video the other week on something called travel hacking. This is where you get points. These birds, man. This is where you get points for money that you're already spending, which you can then trade in to get things like free flights. I do this all the time. Another benefit of getting something like booking.com or booking your accommodation on booking.com rather than Airbnb is that usually the points per pound on booking.com versus Airbnb is a lot better. I think this week, for example, it's 6 points per pound on booking.com. Another benefit of using booking.com rather than Airbnb is that they've got their own discount as well, called Genius discount. So if you book loads of accommodation through booking.com, they've got their own benefits. You get more discounts. At the moment, I'm on Genius level 3, which is the top one, and quite often I'll get free breakfast or 20% off my stay. So it varies every time, but that's also really good. In terms of when to travel as well, I think it's worth saying that it's always worth traveling a couple of days before the first activity if you can, not just to get used to the heat, but also to make sure that you're there. The first few years that I did Destination, I didn't charge enough for it, and I felt like I was really stressed, wondering if my flight was going to get delayed, and the anxiety of knowing that I might miss the wedding because all it would take was one delayed flight. That was so stressful and enough to put me off. So yeah, make sure that you travel with enough days between you going there and the first activity so that if anything goes wrong, you're covered. Last year, because of flight availability and other weddings, for the first time ever, I travelled to a wedding the day before. Obviously something went wrong. I was all checked in, everything was going well, got to the gate, handed over my passport, and I didn't have my passport. I had Jamie's passport. Luckily, it was the first flight of the day. So Jamie was actually on a night shift. I rang him and he came down to London. I can't remember which London airport it was, but I basically had to go to a different London airport to be able to get a flight just a few hours later, and it was all fine in the end. But my God, the stress. Luckily, there was no pre-wedding event that day. It was just the wedding the next day, so I still made it with plenty of time, but my God, that was stressful. And I guess that's another thing to consider. Not only is it worth driving a bit further to get to fly from an airport in the UK, but also choosing somewhere like Manchester or London where there's lots of other connections elsewhere is a really good idea, so that if something does go wrong, you're still protected that way. The next thing that I'm going to talk to you about is kit and what to bring. This week alone, 4 film cameras have broken. I've had a laser burn to my camera and the hot shoe is broken off my flash. I say this week alone, the last couple of weeks. So just make sure that you've got spares of everything. It's also a really good idea to make sure that your second shoot team, if you've got second shooters, shoot on the same kit as you. I always do this anyway, not just for consistency when I'm editing, but also for security. If anything was to break, I've got the extra security that way. In terms of second shooter contracts, I'm going to link my second shooter guide below, which has got a template. It's watertight. The only thing that I'll say skimming over it is just to make sure that you've got a watertight second shoot contract and you've really stressed how long they could be working per day, because it tends to be longer for destination weddings. And also, if you want them to travel out before you, that you compensate them accordingly. I don't want my second shooter to be arriving the day before the wedding, because that's going to give me the same amount of stress as if I was travelling out the day before the wedding. I typically want to travel out with my second shooter, share the driving, share all the stress, share the kit, share everything. And by share kit, I don't mean that I'll be necessarily using their kit, but again, just making sure that I know what focal lengths they've got, that they've got an ND filter, if they're shooting film, that they're shooting on the right film. So my second shoot contract is quite watertight, especially for destination, because I want to make sure that my stall is laid out way before they say yes or no. They know how much they're going to get paid and what I'm expecting, and then if they say yes or no, I know that everything is clear. I think too often when you're figuring out yourself what your destination packages are looking like. You don't necessarily give the second tutor enough information, and that's totally fine in the beginning. It's just part of it, right? Learning something new. What I would say is to specify the hours and to make sure it's clear to them things like what you want them to wear, what kit you want them to bring, what days you're expecting them to be in the country, if you're expecting them to be able to drive you around or not, or if you're happy for them to get public transport. These are all the things that you should be communicating with them in advance, so that if they say yes or no, they know what they're signing up to, basically. And then there's just a few more things that I'm going to mention. I'm going to try and do these mega quick. So the next thing is film. Just make sure that you carry your film in a separate bag ready to get hand checked as you go through security. A really good idea that I saw on Reddit, I think, that I've been doing this year that has been working, is to get a few boxes of 800, even if you wouldn't use them normally for destination. Although more and more I'm trying to not use flash during things like the first dance, but I go off on a tangent. But try and get a few boxes of 800 to put in there, because quite often if an airport scanner is airport safe, they will say up to 800. So if you can get 800 or higher and have that in the box, they're more likely to say yes to hand checking it because of that factor. In terms of film, I might have mentioned earlier that a lot of my film cameras have broken on this trip. Obviously the nature of film means that it's old, so just make sure that if you have offered film and it's an integral part of your contract, your second shooter shoots film and you take spares, because nobody ever plans for their kit to break, but it's probably going to break if it's film. With the lasers as well, I mentioned that I'd got laser burn. I've tried to avoid it, but yeah, it didn't work. Europeans love lasers, so just make sure that you are standing with your backs to the lasers. And if there's things like disco balls, which is how I think it got me, you're extra careful with the disco balls as well if you don't feel like you can ask the DJs to turn it off. There were so many that I just felt like I didn't stand a chance. I did really try to keep my camera away from the lasers, but it still happened, and hopefully I'll be able to claim through my insurance and get it back. But yeah, Europeans love lasers, so just be extra careful with those. Maybe if it is like the party section and you've already got some party shots, maybe just go on to analog if you're offering analog. It doesn't normally take long for us to get all the shots, so maybe put your lens cap on and just be a bit more curated over what you're shooting whilst the lasers are on, just to protect your kit a little bit. And then the last two things that I'm going to mention are really quick. One is an eSIM. I'm currently trialling a company called Ubigi, Ubigi. It's not affiliated in any way, but I thought I had an all singing, all dancing phone contract with Vodafone. Turns out I only have 25 gig, and it didn't take long of hotspotting to upload galleries and stuff for that data allowance to run out. So I'm actually trialling an eSIM at the moment, and it's going quite well. Can't believe how easy it was to set up. I am new to the eSIM world. If anyone's got any recommendations, please send them my way, because I'm new. The signal's been good overall for Instagram and stuff, but it's not been the best. So if anybody's got any recommendations for even faster in mainland Europe, do let me know. And then the last thing, I'm sure there's loads that I've missed out, but this is really important. Make sure that you bring some cash. It sounds so silly because most places in the UK take card now, but when you go to Italy, for example, which is where I am now, it's literally like going back to the dark ages. And most places, not only do they not take card, but it's often cheaper. Even if they do take card, it's cheaper for you to pay cash. So make sure that you've got cash, and also make sure that you've got a variety of denominations, not just 20s and 50s, because then if they don't have change, you're not going to have to pay €20 to get it. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do consider subscribing. I'm sure I'll make another one of these videos later on, because more stuff will crop up, but that's just stuff that I thought was quite relevant for the first time around. Thank you so much for being here.